She told him she'd be back before the sun hit the porch. That was the last thing Elijah remembered her saying. It was July 2nd, 1963. The air was thick with the kind of heat that made everything move. Slower, but not that day. That day moved fast. Too fast. Faster than any child could understand. He was 8 years old, sitting on the front steps of a weather-worn house in Leftwood County, Mississippi, swinging his legs over red dirt, holding a stick like it was a sword, watching the road, waiting. His mama, Gloria May Carter, had gone into town to help Miss Laverne register colored folks to vote. Elijah didn't know what that meant. All he knew was that Mama was brave, and when she walked into town, she walked like someone with purpose, like someone who didn't care who stared. But that day, she never came back. What came instead was the sheriff's car, big, white, covered in dust and lies. Welcome to Injustice Browning. I'm Mark Joie. This one's for the names they tried to erase. Hit subscribe if you care about truth. Drop a comment if you've ever felt silenced by a system that was never built for you. Now listen close. Elijah stood up when he heard the tires crackle against gravel. He thought maybe they were bringing Mama home. Then the white deputies got out, and they weren't smiling. They didn't knock, didn't ask a question, didn't even look at him for more than a second. Just pushed past, through the screen door, straight into the house. Elijah followed, heart thumping in his chest like a fist. He didn't understand their words, not really, but he understood their tone. Something mean, something final. His baby, sister, June, had been sleeping on a pillow in the corner. She woke up screaming. The deputies grabbed a box, papers. One of them cursed under his breath. The other one spit on the floor. Elijah wanted to yell, wanted to do something, but his legs wouldn't move. His hands were shaking. And then the taller one looked down at him and said, "You Elijah Carter?" The boy nodded slow. Not anymore. They took him that night. No goodbye. No chance to grab the rag doll his sister chewed on. No photo of his mama. Nothing. He was thrown in the back of the car like a stray dog. His sister's cries faded behind him as they drove into the dark. No one told him where he was going. No one told him why. All he knew was his mama was gone, and the way they said her name made it sound like dirt. She was charged with assaulting a police officer. They said she'd stolen something from a store she never even walked into. Said she resisted arrest. Said she was dangerous, but folks in town knew what really happened. She'd embarrassed the sheriff. She called him out at a church meeting, called him a liar, called him a thief, told everyone he'd been stealing ballots, hiding registrations, threatening folks who wanted to vote. That kind of truth, it made white men nervous. So the next day, the sheriff made up a story, sent his boys to arrest her. The papers printed her mugshot like it meant something. No trial, no lawyer, just a cell. And then she disappeared. They sent Elijah to a state-run foster facility for towns over. He'd never even heard the name before. Steel beds, cold eggs, men with batons on their belts, and no time for tears. On his first night, they gave him a new shirt and a new name. "You Eddie now," the woman said, handing him a clipboard. He blinked at her. "Your mama gone. You don't need that name anymore." He wanted to scream, but he didn't, because even at 8, Elijah already knew when they take your name, they're trying to take everything. He laid awake that night, listening to a boy cry in the bunk next to his. He didn't ask who he was. Nobody asked anything in there, because nobody wanted to remember. But Elijah remembered every crack in the porch, every wrinkle in his mama's hands, the way June's curls tickled his arm when she leaned on him. He remembered what they stole. And though the world would try to bury him beneath a name that wasn't his, a number that replaced his story, and a silence that was easier to ignore than to fix, he remembered, and he swore one day they would remember too. The first snow Elijah ever saw was in Detroit. It fell slow, quiet, and soft like the world had pressed mute. But even in all that stillness, the cold couldn't cover the truth. He didn't belong there. By then, they were calling him Eddie. Said it was easier that way. Said Elijah sounded too Southern, too black, too biblical. Said he'd thank them later. He never did. He was 9 when the bus dropped him off on a gray sidewalk in a neighborhood that looked nothing like home. The houses were close together, each one with bars on the windows, no dirt roads, no rocking chairs, no front porch with sweet tea, just brick, cement, and eyes that watched from behind curtains. His new foster parents were Mr. and Mrs. Denning. They didn't hit him, but they didn't hug him either. They said grace before dinner, but never said his name with warmth. They gave him a room in the basement, small, cold, and always damp, a cot, a Bible, and a single photo frame with the original picture ripped out. Eddie was told not to ask about his past. You're lucky we even took you in. Mrs. Denning would snap. Don't go around making up sob stories. He wasn't making anything up. He remembered everything. His mama's face, the way she'd hum gospel under her breath while sweeping, the sunlight on June's cheek when she slept, the bang of the screen door just before it all fell apart, and most of all, that cry, that single sound June made when the deputies busted in. It had cut through him like glass, and even now, years later, he still heard it in his sleep. Some nights, it woke him up gasping, but no one cared about Elijah Carter in Detroit. To the state, he was Eddie D. Brown. Middle initial didn't stand for anything. It was just there to make the file neater. He went to school, tried to fit in, failed. Kids called him slow, weird, dirty. Teachers wrote him off before he even opened his mouth. Every time he tried to speak on what happened, someone shut it down. That's not what happened. You were too young to remember. That's all in the past. You should be grateful. Grateful for what? For being renamed like a stray dog? For being told he was wrong about his own memories? For having no pictures of his mother? No record of his birth? Not even a damn answer about where his sister went? By 12, he stopped asking. He kept his head down, came home when the streetlights buzzed on, did his chores, ate quietly. He started drawing, not for fun, for proof. He'd sketch his mama's face from memory over and over again, trying to get it right. Her chin, her cheekbones, her eyes. He was scared he might forget one day, and if he forgot, then she'd really be gone. Sometimes, he'd hear other kids talking about family vacations, holiday dinners, birthday songs. Eddie never told them that his last birthday with his mother was spent eating cornbread and beans under a busted ceiling fan, and it was still the best day of his life. At 15, he asked Mr. Denning once if he could try to find his sister, just once. The man laughed like it was a joke. That's not your sister, boy. That's a memory. But Elijah, no matter how much they tried to scrub the name out of him, never believed that. A memory doesn't cry like that. A memory doesn't look you in the eyes while your whole world falls apart. The foster system taught him how to act invisible, how to survive on silence, how to pretend that being unwanted wasn't something to be ashamed of. But deep down, a fire was burning, small, hidden, quiet, but real. Every time someone told him to move on, that fire got hotter. Every time someone mispronounced his name and didn't care to fix it, it grew. And every time he passed a mirror and saw a face that didn't match the lies they'd written on his paperwork, it roared. Because somewhere out there was a girl with curls, barely old enough to walk, whose voice cracked the air like thunder, and that sound never left him. That sound was the only thing that still felt real. It started with a slip. He was 16, sitting at the kitchen table, peeling potatoes slow, because Mr. Denning didn't like idle hands. The news was playing in the background some story about a protest down south. People getting arrested for marching without a permit. Nothing new. Then Aunt Jackie, Mrs. Denning's cousin who only came by when there was bourbon to sip, leaned over and said it soft. Your mama used to raise hell like that too. Elijah froze. What? He asked, careful not to sound too eager. Jackie blinked like she didn't mean to say it out loud. I ain't say nothing. Forget it. But he didn't. He couldn't. That one sentence cracked something wide open. All these years, he'd been told his mother was nobody. A poor southern woman who got locked up for stealing or fighting or being too mouthy. But what if that wasn't true? What if she hadn't just vanished, but been erased? A few days later, when the Dennisons were at church, Elijah snuck into the basement storage, dug through old boxes, tax records, report cards, useless papers until he found one folder at the bottom, sealed with a rusted clip. It wasn't much. A name, Gloria May Carter. His name too, Elijah J. Carter. Not Eddie. Never Eddie. One yellowed page said state custody transferred due to maternal incarceration, but the charges, the reason, it was all blacked out. He stared at that redacted paper like it was a map to a place he'd been told didn't exist. A week later, he skipped school and went to the downtown library. He didn't know what he was looking for. Not exactly. Just something real. After 4 hours flipping through newspaper archives from 1963, he found her, buried in a corner of an old article. Beneath an ad for chewing tobacco and a farm auction listing was a name: local agitator Gloria Carter arrested on suspicion of inciting unrest. That was it. No picture, no follow-up, no trial, just a name, an accusation, and silence. But to Elijah, it was everything. He read it 5 times, 10. Her name in print, not whispered, not erased. There, on paper, it was real. And the article's author, the byline read Deputy Harold W. Pruitt, the same man who later became sheriff, promoted 3 years after her arrest, praised for cleaning up the county. Elijah sat there, fists clenched so tight his nails dug into his palms. They'd built careers off her suffering, off her silence, off the lie that she didn't matter, but she mattered to him. And he knew deep in his bones she mattered to more than just him. Somebody remembered, somewhere. Someone knew more than what that clipped headline said. He started writing letters, to the court, to the county office, to anyone who might still hold records. Most didn't answer. Some sent back forms filled with blanks and not available. But each dead end only made him more certain. They had taken his name, taken his sister, buried his mother under words like agitator and criminal, and never once admitted the truth. She had been fighting for something, and for that, they crushed her. So Elijah made himself a quiet promise. He was going to find June, no matter what it took. He was going to speak his real name again, out loud, in rooms that tried to forget it. And he was going to make them remember Gloria May Carter not as a case file, not as a cautionary tale, but as a woman who stood up when standing up could get you killed. They tried to bury her story, but they didn't bury him. And now, that silence they built around her, he was going to set it on fire. He walked into that courthouse like a man dragging every ghost he'd ever known behind him. 23 years old, fresh out of a junior college where nobody knew who he really was, dressed in his one good jacket, holding a folder full of papers that still smelled like ink and sweat. His legal name Elijah J. Carter, restored to weeks earlier by a quiet judge who barely looked up when he signed it. But to Elijah, it was the loudest moment of his life. Now, he stood inside the very building that had shattered his world. Same town, same crooked floors, same tin ceiling fan clicking slow like a bad memory. The new sheriff wasn't Pruitt, but the name still hung on the wall behind the front desk. Harold W. Pruitt, retired, a black and white portrait, smiling like the devil got his pension. Elijah stepped to the counter, cleared his throat. "I need to file a civil rights complaint," he said. The clerk barely looked up. "On what grounds?" Elijah laid the folder down flat. "Wrongful arrest of my mother, forced separation, illegal renaming, state custody without due process." Now the clerk looked. That was decades ago. Elijah didn't blink, and I'm still living it. The room went quiet. They didn't expect someone like him to come back. Most don't. But Elijah wasn't most. He spent the next year pushing paper uphill, every form, every deadline, every phone call that went unanswered. He worked night shifts, cleaning office buildings just to afford gas and court fees. And still, they called him a liar, making it up, no proof, looking for a payout, trying to stir up trouble. They called his mother a radical, a menace, a woman who got what she had coming. But something strange started happening. Whispers, soft voices, people who remembered, older black women who saw her walk into town every Thursday, head high, men who remembered her at revival meetings, handing out pamphlets in front of the hardware store, folks who knew the truth but had stayed quiet out of fear or because silence was the only thing that let them survive. One day, after a community meeting at a local church, an elder pulled Elijah aside. "You her boy?" he asked. Elijah nodded. The man just closed his eyes. She was brave. She shamed him. That's why they came for her, and they took everything. Another woman handed him an old photograph. Faded, torn. His mother on the church steps, smiling, holding a little girl, June. Elijah's heart stopped. She looked just like he remembered. The front teeth missing, ribbon in her hair. Then one day, months into the fight, a letter came. No return address. Inside was a name, a phone number, a message written in shaking pen. "I was a nurse at the juvenile records office. I saw what they did. They forged adoption papers, said your sister had no living relatives. But I knew that wasn't true. I kept a copy. She was adopted by a white couple in Ohio. I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner. I'm dying now. But I want peace. She's alive." Elijah couldn't breathe. He stared at that letter for an hour before picking up the phone. His fingers shook the whole time. The woman who answered wasn't his sister, but she knew her. Her name was now Rachel, raised in Akron, married, 2 kids. And yes, she was adopted. It took Elijah 3 days to make the drive. Every mile felt like a memory climbed to the surface. The porch swing, the dirt road, that cry. He sat outside her house for 2 hours before knocking when the door opened. He didn't recognize her at first, but her eyes, those same soft brown eyes, hit him like a flood. She didn't know him, not yet. But when he showed her the photo, the one from the church steps, her breath caught. She stepped back. Her hands started shaking. She whispered, "That's me." And Elijah just nodded. Tears slid down his face before he could stop them. "Yeah," he said, "and that's our mama." She didn't know who he was, not at first. She looked at him like you look at a stranger who says something that stirs a memory you didn't know you had. Her eyes searched his face, careful, cautious, then dipped back down to the photo. "This is her," she whispered. Elijah nodded, barely able to speak. "That's Mama, Gloria May Carter. And that little girl in her arms, that's you, Rachel." Her new name sat down slow, holding the picture like it might break. She didn't cry right away, not until Elijah pulled out the second photo, the one he carried in his wallet since he was 16, the one he'd drawn himself, his mother's face, sketched from memory. She stared at it for a long time. Then the tears came. "I never knew I was taken," she said. "They said my real parents were gone. Car crash. No names. Just gone." Elijah just listened. He didn't blame her. How could he? She grew up in a quiet suburb, in a house with white shutters and piano lessons. She never went hungry, but she also never got the truth. She had questions all her life, and no one willing to answer them. Until now, they sat at that kitchen table for hours, not as strangers, but as what they were, brother and sister. He told her about Mississippi, about the red dirt and the porch steps, about the scream she let out when the deputies stormed, and how that sound had followed him through every foster home, every cold night, every quiet heartbreak. And she told him about the gaps in her childhood, the dreams, the fear of abandonment that never had a source. It didn't all click at once. Truth never lands clean like that. It shows up in pieces, in pauses, in breathless recognition. But together, they rebuilt it. One name at a time. A few months later, they drove down to Mississippi together. The land where their house once stood was now overgrown, covered in weeds and old memories. Elijah stood there in silence, Rachel beside him, holding a small bouquet of flowers neither of them had words for. He brought stones, one carved with her name, Gloria May Carter, another with the words, "She stood tall when others bowed low." They tried to erase her, we remember. Rachel placed her hand on the stone and just said, "Thank you." Not to him, to her, to the woman they lost, to the mother they never got the chance to grow up with, but who still lived in every shared glance, every stubborn heartbeat, every truth they had fought to uncover. The state never gave them justice. The court denied their case, said it was too old, said the records were incomplete, said it wasn't actionable. But they got something better. They got the truth. They got each other. And now, their mother's name wasn't buried in some redacted file. It was carved into stone. For everyone to see. For every child who was taken. For every voice silenced. For every name they tried to make disappear. Elijah made sure this one would never fade. You hear stories like mine. You think it's rare. It's not. They did this to thousands of us. Maybe tens of thousands. Black children taken from their homes. Mothers locked away without trial. Names changed. Papers forged. Lives split down the middle and filed away under order or reform. That's what they called it, reform. The streets had another name for it. Said it was just the way things were. Said if you were black and poor and loud, the system would find a way to disappear you. And they were right. But I don't call it reform. I call it theft. Theft of mothers, of siblings, of identity, of futures, of stories that never got told because they made someone uncomfortable. I spent 20 years chasing the name I was born with, and I got lucky. I found the truth. I found my sister. I stood where my mama once stood and carved her name into the earth like a promise. But what about the ones who never found the letter, the ones who don't know they were taken, the ones still walking around with someone else's last name, wondering why they've always felt like a stranger in their own skin? You ever wonder how many names are missing? How many stories were never written? How many children still don't know they were stolen? I do every single day, so if you're hearing this, and something in your gut says maybe this was you, or your mama, or someone you love, keep looking, keep asking, because the silence they built around us isn't forever, and the names they tried to bury, they're rising right now, one by one.